Good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon's edition of The Richard Urban Show. I'm your host, Richard Urban, coming to you from historic Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. We bring you news and views from the unification principle point of view. Today's episode is Iconic Symbol of American Freedom Destroyed in Likely Cyber Attack. So I'd like to address what just happened early Monday morning on about 1:30 a.m. March 26, 2024, when the cargo ship struck the pillar or support for the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore Harbor, just collapsing the bridge. So this, idea that it was an accident is highly unlikely. Many people, like if you see Lara Logan on, the Charlie Kirk Show or on her X channel or on Steve Bannon Show, you can see her talking about that this is almost certainly a cyber attack. There's no way such experienced pilots could, not know how to drive the ship, or they were, sleeping. So no way. These are people who do this for decades. There's very many clear rules about it. So most likely it was a spoofing attack where the GPS, and that's pretty advanced, right, was telling them they were on course. And by the time they realized that they were not on course, this is a huge, 100,000 ton ship. It was impossible to stop the ship. Yeah. So who would do cyber attack? Well, it would be state actors. Very likely, that's a very advanced attack, like possibly China or who knows. Very likely. So really, we've seen so much, and I'd written down just a couple weeks ago in my notes for my show about doing a show about the coup by Communist China. I'd written on March 11th, a couple of weeks ago. How, the fake President Biden, and also that was, by the way, a bizarre State of the Union he gave, talking about Ukraine, talking about how if we give, what was he saying about the people who are coming in the country, if we process them more quickly, they won't come anymore. It made no sense whatsoever. Anyway, we know that he's reversed all the policies, letting hundreds of thousands and even millions of people ultimately pour over the border. Chinese nationals, God knows who, leaving us wide open, purposely destroying our nation, receives, money. His family does, and the big man himself very likely or almost certainly has received, tens of millions from communist China. So is it any surprise this man is purposely destroying our country? And then he tries to blame everything on Russia and creating all these hoaxes about Russia hoax and practically trying to start World War III with Putin. And then, there's many other things going on. So we have to really be aware and awake. So was that an accident? No way. There's absolutely no way the experienced pilots could somehow, quote unquote, accidentally steer a ship into the thing. That was a cyber attack. That means it was state actors. Certainly a likely one is China. But whoever the state actor was, they were definitely a state actor. So this was sabotage and took down a very iconic and symbolic thing. So I want to look at it from a little different angle, not so much the technicalities of what happened. Of course, we don't know all the details, but it's very clear it's a cyber attack. And just the fact that they're saying, without any time for an investigation, we don't know it's a cyber attack, although they couch, as Lara Logan says, the language very carefully. We don't presently know it's a cyber attack. And things like this. So later, when it is a cyber attack, they say, we didn't say it was a cyber attack. Okay. So, this is really amazing. At that point, Francis Scott Key, that was the same point where they built that bridge in 1977, almost 5 decades ago, coming toward 5 decades. on the same point where the British bombarded Baltimore Harbor. And then, you know, Francis Scott Key wrote about that in our national anthem. So this is what is called non-kinetic warfare. Literal act of war happened. Biden or his, clueless, secretaries of transportation or state or FBI can say anything they want. Basically, probably whatever they say, figure it's the opposite. But this is clearly by people who know, who have inside sources. They all say it was a cyber attack. So the question is, that I'd like to approach it as, what will be this outcome? We see this coup occurring, not just in the collapse, in the cyber attack of this iconic bridge and type of a monument, really, because it's a key critical infrastructure of the East Coast of the U.S., but, also named the Francis Scott Key Bridge, the iconic figure of the writer, author of the Star-Spangled Banner. But do note that even though the British were bombarding Baltimore Harbor, they did not succeed, and they ultimately retreated. So what is the real basis for the collapse of our country? I mean, this is definitely a tragic thing, and also I want to offer condolences to those who, had loved ones who are working on the bridge or who are driving across, and plunged to their death, because I've only heard about like 2 people surviving so far. So, but what is the real thing that's going on? What is the real foundation of our country? So we see that this huge ship took out this pillar, or maybe I think part of the pillar is still there. But anyway, it knocked the bridge down, which is the huge force of momentum, and through this cyber attack. So, but what is the real pillar of our country? It's the families of our country. The God, and it's not just, the Constitution or, it is the Constitution, it is the freedoms that God guarantees, but more specifically, it's the, how do you say, the foundation of families in the United States. So what is Biden, and not just Biden, but the whole, especially Biden though, starting with Obama, what has been done? This whole assault on traditional families. Whereas just in 2008 in California, the California residents voted and said, just, not so long ago, 15 years ago, that marriage is defined as man and woman. And then our Supreme Court comes along with this mythical right for same-sex people to have marriage. And then people say, oh, live and let live or whatever. But actually, we see that it's a campaign to jam all this stuff down people's throats. And if you don't agree with it, like currently we're going to have a guest soon to talk about what's going on in Montgomery County, where they say you can't even opt your kids out of this crap, And of course, that's not going over well with all kinds of people of faith, including Muslims, Christians, and anybody else who has decent, values. So the real foundation of our country is the family structure. And the fact of the matter is, 40% of children now are born outside of marriage in our country. In places like D.C., Southeast, is over like 75% born outside of marriage. But right here in West Virginia is 47%. It's not substantially any different. What's the difference? So when we see children growing up without parents, many instances, then we're seeing the breakdown of society. When you look at people who are in trouble, who are delinquent, who have all kinds of behavioral issues, what's the key factor? Instability in the home is the key factor. So this is the kind of thing we need to work on. We need to reverse this crazy decision by about same-sex marriages being somehow a right. Same-sex marriage isn't a right. God decides what rights we have. And he created men and women. And then you have the whole transgender issue, mutilating children. This is an abomination in front of God, and we have to stop it. So, I mean, that's the real foundation of society. So, yes, it is tragic that this cyber attack knocked down or collapsed the iconic Francis Scott Key Bridge. But the more serious issue is the knocking down and destruction of God's ideal of the family. So, I'd like to see Christians, Muslims, Jews, all kinds of people come together on this issue. And let's agree on that issue. And there's not anything to argue about. So I'm kind of dumbfounded that this issue isn't brought up more in the public sphere because it's the foundation of every problem. So that's the most shameful thing about the Biden administration, promoting all this LGBTQ crap. And not just promoting it, but jamming it down people's throats under force of law. And that's been going on now for some years since this terrible Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court needs to reverse that stat. That's more critical even than the Roe v. Wade. You know, redefining things that aren't redefinable. So that's why our country is tanking, if you want to know in God's eyes. Yes, it's extremely bad that there's all kinds of criminal activities going on from the White House and other places, but also there's too many people going along with these things for money or power or, acceptance or whatever the different things are that people do to compromise their conscience. So definitely we need to be aware of these things. And definitely we need to fight against them. So I ask you to join us in this fight by promoting absolutely good sexual ethics, which is something, as you know, if you listen to my show, I've been talking about for a long time. So before we have a secure external America and solve all these problems, which we need to solve, that cause things like this cyber attack is like symbolic of America under Joe Biden. The collapse of this iconic structure is just exactly what Biden's doing to our country. But it isn't just Biden, it's all of us in the sense that, we have collapsed values. We have collapsed support and protection for our children. Why is it no longer important to protect our children? Why is it okay for two men to adopt babies? And sometimes I just, even using them for sex, little kids. Yeah, that happened. I was just reading about a case yesterday. That's an abomination. How could God ever support that and bless that? How can we allow such a thing? So that's what needs to really be reversed. And then, of course, we need to fight for integrity on all levels of our country. That's not a left or right thing. That's a good versus evil thing. Something that's decent versus something that's indecent. So it's no coincidence that those who are promoting this kind of destruction of a country, i.e. Biden and all his cronies, and many others, left and right, are, corrupt. And if they don't even know about absolute sexual ethics, that sex is between a man and a woman in a lifetime bond, and they promote every other thing, and even having people without their shirts on or clothes on dancing around the White House, then is it any wonder that our country's under collapse? And not just the bridge, but the more important structure of our moral foundations. So let's keep this bridge in mind in the sense that, this is symbolic of the Biden's America. But not only Biden's, as I said, a corrupt America that's, caused this collapse. So let's build a strong foundation as we rebuild our country based on the foundation of absolute sexual ethics. That means no sex until you're married. And also parents have a high involvement in children's lifetime happiness, including helping them find a marriage partner. And we made a website to help you to do that. It's called unionstation.love, and parents are welcome to help their children there. Their adult children can register, take a blessing education course, and join a matching site, unionstation.love, where they can find their eternal partner in a godly way. Isn't that our most important responsibility toward the future generations? So let's do this, and we'll rebuild our country with the foundation of absolute sexual ethics and moral values, as well as all the external things that need rebuilding, now tragically symbolized by the collapse of the iconic Francis Scott Key Bridge nearby me here. I'm in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, in Baltimore. So again, we do pray for all those who were directly affected, and even the crew members. I'm sure they're all really sick. The captains, that they couldn't prevent this cyber attack. And let's really rise up from this situation. And we are victorious. We're already victorious if we accept and embrace God's message of absolute sexual ethics and build on that. That is already a victory. It's been won. And the blessing of marriage has already been won. The victory. We just need to understand it and embrace it. And stop bickering among all the people who are God believers. Work together on that common base of absolute sexual ethics. So that's my message today. I do pray that God can bless you, and we'll see you next time. This is Richard Irvin reporting from historic Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. God bless and good afternoon.